Welcome back to Green Connections. I'm Joan Michelson. Aren't those science kits amazing? Here's another gift idea for kids. Do you want to give your kids books as gifts for the holidays or anytime, birthdays, just for no reason? Here are some terrific suggestions for books that will inspire your kids and also help them learn about the environment and energy. I'd like you to meet Lynne Cherry. Lynn is an author who has written 30 children's books about the environment for all ages of kids, and now is a filmmaker, making short movies about the amazing kids she's found around the world that are doing terrific environmental projects and really making a difference. I met Lynn on Earth Day when she was exhibiting her slew of books at an Earth Day exhibit here in Washington, D.C., and I was blown away by the number of books she's written and the range of topics they cover, as well as the fact that they're there for all different age groups. I would imagine that's kind of hard to do, to write for different age groups. Let's listen to Lynne Cherry talk about her books and her films and some of the incredible kids she's met and how she's giving them a voice.
Well, all my books, when the way I would decide on what book I was going to write next, it depended on what needed to be done in the world. So I'd ask myself, what needs to be done? And then what can kids do to make a difference? And so that was how I decided to write a book. So then eventually I wrote a book on climate change, which about 6 years ago with Gary Brosh. And I realized climate change was the biggest issue of our time. And so we realized that if we told people just about gloom and doom and just barraged them with the scientific information, that we would get them all depressed and they would turn off. And the way to empower people was to tell them success stories. So kids, when I was doing the books, kids would come up to me and tell me how they were changing the world. And these were wonderful, inspirational stories that I've been sharing with people for 25 years. So I decided to take the same approach with climate change and start telling these stories about kids who are reducing CO2 emissions. And so I now have 9 movies, Young Voices for the Planet, and each one of them is a separate story about a kid or a group of kids who are significantly reducing CO2 emissions, and the projects that they're doing are replicable, which means that anyone else could do them, and in fact, we wonder, why isn't everybody doing them? So, for instance, there are 4 girls from Florida who did an energy audit of their school, and they saved their school $53,000 in energy costs. There's an 11-year-old boy from Germany who started a website to plant trees. It went viral. He's now up to 3 billion trees that he's planted through his website. There's some students in Santa Monica, California, who saw the connection between fossil fuel and plastic bags and marine life, and so they got a ban on plastic bags in Santa Monica. So there are these kinds of stories where anyone could be doing these things in their community, so why not?
How did you find these kids?
The kids, well, initially I was talking to someone at Earth Island Institute, and they have a Brower Youth Award, and Alec Loers had applied for a Brower Youth Award when he was 12, but he was too young to get it. So I just happened to call them after he had applied, and they said, well, why don't you interview Alec? And he was great. He had a group called Kids versus Global Warming. And then Alec was very well connected, and he knew his Team Marine, he knew Green Ambassadors, and then I knew of this other group, Girl Scouts in San Francisco. So I got funding and hired a crew, and we went to California and we shot for 10 days. And we made 5 films from that first filming. And then ever since the films have been up on the internet and they've been shown, like they were shown at the American Museum of Natural History, and that people see them, and then I get letters and emails about other kids who I should feature. And now I just wish I had enough time and energy and funding to do movies of all the kids who deserve to have films made of them.
I noticed that you have, in your fan letters, you have one from Dr. Seuss and one from Al Gore. There's got to be a story in there. How did those come about?
Al Gore, I was at the Birchmere, it's just a folk music place in Virginia, and this is before Al Gore announced his run for the vice presidency a long time ago. And I went up to him and said, my publisher sent you a copy of my book, The Great Kapok Tree. Did you I didn't get a letter back from you. Did you get it? And he said, The Great Kapok Tree? That's my son's favorite book. And he had Tipper with him, and he dragged me over to Tipper and said, Tipper, this is the author of The Great Kapok Tree. So he wrote me a note after that, thanking me for the book and saying how much his kids liked it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great story. I love that story. How have the kids changed? You've been doing these books now for 30 years and the films. You've seen some changes, I'm sure. How have kids changed?
Yeah, kids are more sophisticated these days than they were 30 years ago. They grow up faster. I think because they see so much of the problems on TV, but I think it's getting through to them that kids have power and kids can make a difference. And once kids know how much power they have to make change, they start acting. And there's no stopping them. And I think that's when you see these movies, the Young Voices for the Planet movies, I think that anyone seeing them, whether it's an adult or kids, they're incredibly inspired and empowered by them. Parents might look at them and say, oh, gee, I'm falling down on the job. I'm putting all this on the shoulders of the kids. Is that fair? The kids just say, if the adults aren't going to take the reins, then we're going to do it because this is our future. And that makes grown men cry.
And move to action.
Yes, the kids, just as the kids were the motivators for recycling, for stopping smoking, for littering, wearing seatbelts, they're going to be the motivators that stop us from putting so much CO2 into the atmosphere and trying to reverse some of what's happened with climate change.
These kids are so inspiring, and I love that Lynn is doing this and giving these kids a voice and sharing their stories with us. Imagine earning $53,000 for your school with an environmental project. Imagine planting 1 billion trees around the world as a kid. Wow. What I heard from Lynn is that these kids don't get deterred by obstacles. They just plow ahead. And yet, adults get deterred by overwhelm. I can relate to overwhelm. I know you can relate to overwhelm. But we don't get deterred. Now I'd like you to meet one more author very briefly. This is a terrific woman named Andrea Beaty, who I met when I was at Child's Play interviewing Stephen. Andrea Beaty wrote a very cool book called Rosie Revere, Engineer. It's about a little girl who learns how to make things. What do I mean by a little girl who makes things? Let's listen to Andrea describe it, because she does a much better job than I would. Let's listen to Andrea Beaty.
I talk about a girl who is a second grader, who's an amazing, amazing engineer, has mad skill. She makes all kinds of fantastic inventions, from things like broken dolls, from things from recycling, from cheddar cheese spray. The kid can make a helicopter out of cheddar cheese spray and some trash. Amazing skill. But along the way, she kind of gets the wind knocked out of her sails until her great-great-aunt, who is Rosie the Riveter, shows up and kind of gives her a challenge, and the kid sort of makes a whole new invention for her, and she ultimately fails and has to learn that through failure is when you actually learn. So she has to learn not to give up.
So what this also addresses is creativity skills and innovation skills. So it works your creativity muscles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the most important thing. We have so many things we need to get done in this country and in this world. And if we can have creative problem-solving skills, especially for our kids, that's so enormous. That's what we need.
How did you come up with this? How did you decide what to include? I mean, it sounds really cool because they're engineering in the sense of they put things together and they take things apart and they make things from unusual stuff. I mean, how did you come up with this?
This is actually a partner book to Iggy Peck Architect, which came out about 7 years ago, and I wrote because my son used to love to build things from whatever he could find. And I thought, what if there was a kid who was an architect? And that book has just consistently been more and more popular by word of mouth and by parents who have those sort of creative kids who may be a little offbeat, but so imaginative. So that is where the story came from. And Rosie Revere is one of the kids in Iggy Peck's classroom.
Doesn't Rosie Revere Engineer sound really cool? I bought a copy, so I'll let you know. If you have the book or if you go to a book reading session of hers, please let us know on Facebook or Twitter. You can find a link to the book on our website and a few photos that I took from the cute little reading group she had with kids at Child's Play in Washington. It was adorable. And her passion is so exciting for this. I want to give this to like every little girl that I know. It's really fabulous. There's a quote that comes to mind from Dr. Brené Brown. Maybe you've seen her TED Talks that have gone viral with millions of views on the web and even landed her on Oprah's network. Dr. Brown wrote a book called Daring Greatly. She said, "Daring greatly is being scared and brave at the same time." Daring greatly is being scared and brave at the same time. I love that. Reminds me of so many moments in my life, and I'm sure of yours. Sometimes we just have to hold our nose and dive in, right? So what have you done that's daring greatly? Tell us on our Facebook page, post it on my Twitter page, @Joan Michelson. It can be large or small. Lynn approaching Al Gore is daring greatly, asking him why he hasn't responded to her book. I thought that was a great story. I did that recently, I must confess. I was at an event, and they sat former Vice President Al Gore next to me while he was waiting to speak. So never one to miss an opportunity. I quietly introduced myself to him, showed him my business card, invited him to be on Green Connections. He took my business card. Hey, you never know, right? His people are following up with me, so we're hopeful that he will be on and soon. So if you're listening, Mr. Vice President, our door is always open. Our microphones are ready for you to join us. So come be on Green Connections. So if you want to have Al Gore on Green Connections, tell us on Facebook. Send me a tweet on Twitter. Send me an email, info@greenconnectionsradio.com, and maybe we'll build a lobby to get Vice President Gore on Green Connections. Wouldn't that be cool? So we're going to take a very short break, and I'd like to give a shout-out to Talkers Radio Network, where we are broadcasting live, and congratulations on your new launch. It's very exciting with the veterans in the talk show industry from Talkers Magazine and Talkers.com. Thank you, Michael Harrison. Thank you, David Bernstein. Well, stay tuned. We'll be right back with a young woman who is taking unsold produce and products from these supermarkets like Whole Foods and from restaurants and repurposing it to feed those who need it most. You'll be inspired by our next guest.
Capital Audio Post, your one-stop shop for your post-production needs. 703-712-8757.
Our services include video editing, sound design, sound mixing, ISDN recording, and many other media-related services.
Let us finish your project no matter where you are, across the U.S. or across the world. Go to www.capitalaudiopost.com. Call us at 703-712-8757.
Let us know how we can help you finish your production.